Panel 3. While Panel 3 is coming forward, in the interest of time, I will also announce that Marcella Tapia and Hubert James will not appear tonight for various reasons. And also, we will include in the record the statements of Representative Hank Johnson, as well as Representative Crowley of New York. Our final panel today comprises those with media expertise on reaching those hard-to-count populations focused on by census efforts. First on our panel is Mr. Danny J. Bakewell. Mr. Bakewell is the chairman of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. The NNPA represents more than 200 black community newspapers from across the United States. Mr. Bakewell is the executive publisher of the Los Angeles Sentinel and owns WBOK radio station in New Orleans. He is the recipient of numerous awards, including the NAACP Image Award and the Congressional Black Caucus Adam Clayton Powell Award. Mr. Bakewell is a much sought-after speaker, community organizer, and leader, and welcome to the committee. Next, we have Mr. Marcelo. No, we don't have him. I'm sorry. We have Mr. James Winston, Executive Director and General Counsel of the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. Mr. Winston is a partner in the D.C. law firm of Rubin, Dirks, Harris, and Cook. He has been the Executive Director of NABOB since 1982. From 1978 to 80, Mr. Winston served as legal assistant to FCC Commissioner Robert Lee. Mr. Winston is a graduate of Harvard Law School and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from the University of Pennsylvania, and welcome to the committee. Next, we have Ms. Sandy Close, Executive Director of New American Media. New American Media is the country's first and largest national collaboration and advocate of 2,000 ethnic news organizations, founded by the nonprofit Pacific News Service in 1996. NAM is headquartered in California. Ms. Close has served as Executive Director of Pacific News Service since 1974. A graduate of UC Berkeley, Sandy was formerly China editor of the Far Eastern Economic Review in Hong Kong and founder of the Oakland-based Flatlands newspaper. Thank you for appearing before the subcommittee today. It is the policy of this committee to swear in all witnesses before they testify, and I'd like to ask each witness to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record, you may be seated, and let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. Each of you will have 5 minutes to make an opening statement, and your complete written testimony will be included in the hearing record. Of course, we have a lighting system which will be operated as soon as my friend gets back. I think I can start it. Anyway, Mr. Bakewell, you are free to begin.
Congressman Clay, I'd like to thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak to your committee. It is really an honor to be here.
Ms. Bakewell, may I ask you to pull the mic a little closer to you? Make sure it's on. There you go. Is that on?
Green.
Yes, okay. It's on. Go ahead.
Congressman Clay and members of the committee, I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity, giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. Congressman Clay, I want to give you a particular vote of confidence or an acknowledgement for the leadership and vision that you have demonstrated in holding these hearings. They are much needed, and hopefully at the end of these hearings you will know that there is much needed to be done. I also want to thank the members on the committee for the vigilant and direct questioning that you have posed to members of the census. You know, sometimes when you come before Congress, you guys are so polite and you're so busy asking for the gentle lady and the gentle man and the gentle cousin. We get lost in terms of the substance of what it is we are trying to accomplish here. So I thank you very much for the directness of your questioning. My time allotted, I'd like to provide you with an enhanced version of my written testimony, which I have submitted. As chairman of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which is the Black Press of America, I represent nearly 200 black newspapers and publishers throughout America. NNPA members reach more than 19 million African Americans and people of the Caribbean descent weekly. This year, NNPA celebrates our 70th anniversary. We are not newcomers to this game. During 2010, we will also celebrate 183 years of tradition and service when the first black newspaper was founded, Freedom Journal. And it's appropriate that the echo of those who founded Freedom Journal says, we desire to plead our own case. And that is very much what we are here today talking about. Black communities throughout America, over the many years, the black press has established a legacy of trust built on honesty and accurately telling the stories of black America from a black perspective to black Americans, about black Americans, and other people of goodwill. The black press is the fiber that connects black communities, small, large, rural, urban, throughout America. Our member newspapers publish in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Greensville, Durham, Shreveport, Michigan, St. Louis, Oakland, Atlanta, Norfolk, Virginia, Washington, Baltimore, Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, all across America. The black press is the black community's drumbeat, felt, heard, read in black households 52 weeks a year throughout the United States. The black press has been and continues to be the gatekeeper and collector of our historical archives and records of every political issue, civil rights struggle, and social justice movement, the challenges, triumphs of our people. The black press's ability to inform, advise, influence, and lead in the black community is unmatched, unchallenged, and unquestioned. The black community's trust and confidence in the black press was forged over many years. No medium represents the black community better. Today, I am here to testify on the importance of the 2010 census to black Americans throughout America, and we want it to work. But I must tell you, there seems to be a lack of importance given to delivering the 2010 census into all black households throughout America, as evident by the census's initial offer to buy advertisement in only a small portion of black newspapers with a budget, they told you 1.7, it was 1.3 million to count 40 million black people. This is a difficult task under any circumstances, but with a budget of 1.3, you don't intend to count black people. As you are aware, the second decade of undercounting blacks will have a devastating impact on blacks living in the U.S. for many years to come. We were undercounted by 2%, and according to the statistics that I understand, 2% represents about $180 million in terms of how that is correlated. If we come up short, we again, for every 1%, it will cost the government $90 million. So this is a clear case of being penny wise and pound foolish. We cannot let this happen. This is not a normal advertising campaign in which you can adjust your strategies. The census has about, as it's been said, about 6 weeks to go. What happens when we get the count wrong? What happens when it comes back and all the households are not responding? We are going to be put in a position where we have to forever hold our peace. If we allow this to happen, black Americans will receive reduced funding in education, reduced funding in health care, reduced resources from government, black elected officials will be severely compromised and threatened, and in many instances lost. We cannot afford that, and I know you understand that. Today I'm here to tell you that even though black newspapers have the trust and respect of the black community, and despite having the ability to deliver advertising message to the masses of black consumers and black people, the way we're going into the market is ineffective and must be altered now. Simply stated, and I've met with and talked to many of you, we need more money. The black press of America needs at least $10 million to have a consistent message in 200 black newspapers throughout America. There is no reason to cherry pick. Wherever black newspapers are, that's where black people are. We wouldn't operate if those communities weren't there. Nobody reads our papers but black people. So if you want to communicate with black people, you have to communicate through us. There are other mediums, just like they talked about the Super Bowl, $2.5 million, fine. But don't expect to count us. Don't expect to get any residue. And you're talking about Thomas Jefferson. When we talk about Thomas Jefferson, we're talking about him and his mistress. We ain't talking about him being the head of the census. So, I mean, let's be real. These people up here were talking to you like if they were teaching a class at Georgetown University. They had no emotion. They just reading. They just talking. They just giddy up. And no, that's the same kind of message that they created to go in our community. It's not provocative. They want to get to our community. Nobody can deliver a better message in Los Angeles than Maxine Waters. Why don't you put her on the front page? Put her in the advertising. Put Lacey Clay in advertising. Put Jackson Lee in advertising. That's the kind of stuff that we need. We need names and people and bodies that are trusted in our community. Let me get back to this script. If we are to deliver, well, let me see, where was I? Oh, okay. You cannot say that you want to count all black people and then unveil a program to advertise in only 16 markets. That's where they started out. 16 markets. Didn't have Doris Ellis, didn't have Dr. Suggs, didn't have Amelia Ward. That's in places like Houston. That's in places like St. Louis. That's in places like Oakland, California. That's in places like North Carolina, South Carolina. No black people live there? What's the deal? How can you do that? How egregious is this? Now we're up to 55 markets, but we still don't have all 200 black newspapers. And this is going to result in the greatest undercount in the history of black America. And you and we will suffer from that. And I beg you, as I have when I've met with you individually, not to let that happen. We cannot travel back down the road of having black Americans once again undercounted and underrepresented in 2010 U.S. Census. The message that we all count and need to be counted cannot be fully realized with an advertising campaign that reaches some African Americans. It must be geared to all African Americans. Black people do not live in only 16 markets in America. We live in America. Black people live in small, large cities, rural, urban, all over America. We must deliver the message where we live, where we pray, where we're educated, and where we're best informed. And the vehicle best to reach us continues to be black newspapers, black radio, and black churches. No question about it. If we are serious about securing an accurate count, we must implement a comprehensive outreach plan that requires placement and advertising of every black newspaper throughout America. If not, the 2010 census information is not going to be captured, and once again, blacks are going to be undercounted and underrepresented, losing out on millions of dollars in our...
Mr. Bakewell, thank you for your presentation. You went 4 minutes over in the interest of the other witnesses. We'll let you...
Maybe during the question and answer period.
In the question and answer period, you will be able to elaborate even more. Thank you very much, Mr. Winston. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Clay, Congresswoman Waters, Congressman Quillar, Congresswoman Jackson Lee. Thank you all for staying to this late hour for this very important discussion. My name is James Winston, and I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel of the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. I thank you for inviting me to testify. NABOB is the only trade association representing the 245 black-owned radio stations and 13 black-owned television stations around the United States. I wish to provide comments on 3 subjects today. First, the paid advertising program targeting African Americans got started significantly later than for other communities. Second, there are problems with choosing stations based solely on Arbitron audience ratings. Third, the allocation of census advertising dollars toward the African American communities should be increased. The ad campaign on general market stations began on January 1st. However, the campaign targeting the African American community got started much later. Some stations have been advised only within the last few days that they will be receiving census ad buys, and some which were previously advised that they would receive census ad buys have yet to be receiving them. Congresswoman Jackson Lee, you made the comment about the Houston Sun, and in questioning Ms. Ennis from Global Hughes said that Houston Sun was on the ad buy, and obviously they have not conveyed that information to you, which sounds exactly like a situation I had just last week. Congresswoman Waters, you'll appreciate this. KJLH in Los Angeles contacted me because they had not gotten a census buy, although they had been told they had one coming. When we contacted the Global Hue last week, they said there was some paperwork mix-up, but of course KJLH was on the buy, and they began the buy just a couple of days ago. So in addition to the lack of money we have, we're not getting it. They are behind the curve in getting the money out, and obviously the program is going to end at the same time for everybody. So if we started more than a month behind, we can't possibly get the messages out in time where they need to be going. So that's a problem that needs to be looked into as to what took so long to get started and why there are still stations that were told they're getting buys that have not gotten bought yet. And worse than the timing issue, however, is the fact that in several markets, the African American owned stations have been completely overlooked. And all the Census Bureau ad buys have been placed with non-African American owned radio stations that target their programming to the African American audiences. These ad buys have relied upon Arbitron audience data to choose these stations. However, a coalition of black and Hispanic broadcasters has demonstrated that Arbitron's new unaccredited measurement service, the Personal People Meter, discriminates against black and Hispanic audiences. Indeed, Chairman Towns of this committee held a hearing investigating Arbitron's PPM on December 2nd of last year. After receiving testimony from the representatives of the PPM Coalition and Arbitron, Chairman Towns directed the parties to meet to resolve this ongoing controversy. The chairman warned Arbitron that they would look at that the committee would look at legislative solution if the parties failed to do so. While the PPM Coalition and Arbitron have met numerous times, no resolution of this problem has been achieved. Moreover, even if the Arbitron data were reliable, reliance solely on Arbitron data would completely ignore the ability of black-owned stations to connect with their communities. It is this connection, shared by both black-owned radio stations and black-owned newspapers, which has enabled these companies to survive for decades without Arbitron data and other data saying that we have large audiences. The connection between black-owned radio and newspapers and their communities is not one that can be measured and cataloged by Arbitron. It must be discerned from experience using those media to achieve a desired result, whether to sell a product or convey important information relevant to that community. That's how you decide that a station is relevant to the community. Local talk show hosts and air personalities can have influence in their communities far beyond the audience numbers generated by Arbitron Yet, in many markets, it appears that the Census Bureau advertising campaign has completely ignored this important fact. This leads me to my final point. The Census Bureau advertising budget needs to be revised to allocate more advertising dollars to black-owned media. As the Bureau is well aware, some of the principal problems affecting the undercount in African American communities are distrust of government and a sense of disconnection from the government. Only a trusted voice in the local community can turn such attitudes around. Established black-owned broadcast stations and newspapers are those trusted voices. They need to have a much more prominent role in the Census Bureau's advertising budget than they have had so far. I urge the committee to examine this matter further and direct the Bureau to make a greater utilization of black-owned media. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Winston. Ms. Close, you may proceed.
Final speaker.
Be sure the microphone is on. Bring it close.
Thank you. As the final speaker, probably the oldest speaker in this room, speaker who just missed my airplane back to San Francisco, I want to echo what the last panel and my fellow panelists here said tonight to you, and to wholeheartedly endorse the idea of expanding investment, especially during this last key post-response phase of the campaign, to those ethnic media embedded in their communities where the low response rate makes them absolutely essential targets. I had hoped to show you a photograph, and I don't know if Anthony stayed. He had kept the photograph to put on the screen, and maybe he's already left, because in some ways a picture is worth 1,000 words. Let me then go back to my text very quickly and come to the most important example. Over the last year, New America Media organized 12 briefings for the U.S. Census for over 600 ethnic media practitioners. We started in New Orleans, we went second to Detroit, then we went to Atlanta, Houston, Chicago, Seattle, Phoenix. We literally canvassed ethnic media across the country, and you could cut their exuberance with a knife. For many of them, in Denver, for example, and in Houston, it was the first time they'd ever seen each other around a table as a collective media force, and at the table with the top census people. And I do salute A.J. Jackson and Maria Matos and Raul Cisneros and Steve Bruckner for trekking long distances to talk with them about the census. The difficulty is that they get the census. Juan Carlos Ramos in New Orleans. In 2000, the undercount of Hispanics in that city prompted Coca-Cola to drop advertising in the Hispanic market in New Orleans. There is no question these media absolutely understand the importance of the census to their audiences. And from our first briefing until our last in Seattle, the anxiety and the sense of in a way, confusion over how they could get involved was very clear. They wanted transparency, and there was very little transparency. How do we get in line? Whom can we call? No one answers our emails. No one answers our phone calls. Above all, they expressed frustration over messaging that, even while offered in 28 languages, was being created often far from their communities and by agencies they had very little input to.
Excuse me, Ms. Close, the
Yes.
photos up.
There are the photographs. It's important that census advertising is being created in Vietnamese, said Thuy Vu of Saigon Radio in Houston, but it's not Houston Vietnamese. Probably the best example came in Hoopa, California, where the American Indian Hoopa and Klamath River tribes are served by two very important American Indian media. But take a look at the ads that the census firms sent the Hoopa, who have lived in redwood forests for 3,000 years. The first was of an American Indian against a cityscape, and the second was of plain Indians walking towards teepees. Both of them they rejected, and we invested a very small amount of money that we raised from a foundation, letting them shape their own messages. And if we can see that message, you'll see the enormous difference. The third ad, which should be coming up right now, was of Hoopa looking out over their very isolated redwood forests and saying, if they don't count you, they'll say no one lives here and they'll take away our water rights. The idea that our ethnic media are the ones who have the knowledge of their communities and should be helping to shape the messages is what leads me and to my final point, because I want to keep this very short. In the last phase, if there could be an SOS campaign, Save Our Services campaign, targeting media that were left out of the ad buy or, like Joe Orozco of Hoopa Radio, felt that they could have done a far better job messaging, like the San Bernardino Sun that was left out, like the Burmese newspaper that has Burmese audiences in Phoenix, in Houston, and in Nashville, like Z Ethiopia here in Washington, with over 100,000 audience left out. They know what the messages are that will really inspire and cut through the fear. And the idea would be invest in them much as we invest in a community-based organization. We don't have time for endless focus groups to shape these ads. We should let these media shape the messages to their communities. And let me tell you, as Freedom Journal put it, we wish to plead our own cause, too long have others spoken for us. They will convey the message that resonates in their communities. I've listed in my testimony some of the dozens of emails from over 47% of the media that came to our briefings with the U.S. Census but never received an ad buy. These folks did know how to apply. They did get in line. They did spend a day to be with the Census folks, and they are ready to go all out. Black media, Asian media, Hispanic media, Russian media, media that are really the unduplicatable audience trusted messenger. And I hope that in this last phase of the campaign, we can maximize those dollars by giving them a leadership role to shape the messages for their communities. In doing that, you will reach 60 million ethnic adults who now rely on ethnic media. Ethnic media is the only sector whose audience has grown by 16%. In conclusion, it's also the media that when asked, what are your primary goals? 68% respond by saying service to the community. Only a third put making a profit as their goal. This is a resource we can't afford to lose as media meltdowns across the country. Your capacity to govern requires communicating with the governed. These are the media that are intermediary, that are just totally ready to get involved, to be at this table, and they've sent the messages to you through us, which are excerpted in the testimony I've left with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that testimony and what you've left this committee. It will certainly guide us in our advocacy for so-called ethnic audiences. Let me recognize the gentlewoman from California first.
Thank you very much,
Fine,
Mr. Chairman. Let me again thank you for holding this hearing. This is very much needed. I think that we have gathered enough information here this evening to move and to get active to make sure that this so-called second phase, or whatever they call it, is done correctly, that more money is put into this advertising budget, more opportunities to shape the message from the local communities. As you are describing, you're right, it's SOS. I agree with you 1,000%. Let me just say before I ask each of you, if you agree that there's got to be more money. You mentioned about $10 million maybe for the African American press, and if we look at all of the groups, we're probably talking about a total of at least somewhere between $30 and $50 million more that's needed to cover everything. Danny Bakewell, may I ask you if, in fact, you advised the Census team that they should extract from you free press in order to get more money in the media buy from the Census team? Did they suggest that in some way? What happened with that conversation?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I have submitted a letter.
Be sure your mic's on. So
It is. I gave you a copy of a letter, one that I sent to Global U, responding to that request, and then another letter, which was a follow-up, that identified specifically, and I want to read it into the record. What we said to them, they were talking about this issue of value added. We said you should ask, underline the word ask, all of the black newspapers who are committed to the census and committed to making sure that black people understand the importance of the census. Ask them to run articles, which we've been doing already, and ask them to run editorials, reinforcing how important the census is. They took the language that we gave them, which was to ask all of the newspapers, and this is what they wrote. In lieu, this is very specific, Congresswoman, because you asked this woman, and she did not respond to this at all. As a matter of fact, this letter is directed to her, and it starts off, I read your email in response to my letter to Mr. Coleman, and once again, you got it wrong. What they said is, in lieu of free ad space in all papers must, underline the word, must agree to running 6 articles, preferably during the hiatus week, about the census 2010, as well as 2 editorials. If papers does not agree to the added value stipulation, buy will be canceled immediately.
You hear this? You hear this?
That was in the order, the insertion order that they sent to the papers.
what is the date of that?
Well, the letter that I sent to her was on January 15th. And I want the record to reflect, some members have told me that they confronted members of the census about this, and they said, I apologize. I have never apologized, nor do I intend to apologize, nor would I ever apologize about anything that I have said regarding to the census's inability to respond to the black community and the black media in terms of allocating the appropriate amount of resources and having the political will. You have the political will, but they are refusing to carry out your political will by putting the appropriate resources next to it. So to answer your question, that was, and I apologize, Mr. Chairman, for being out of order. I'm a little aggravated.
Look,
but the point was,
I realize that you are very emotional
I'm
about
very
this
passionate
issue
about
because
this.
you see it, the time slipping away from us
Yes.
as a nation.
yes,
I
absolutely.
understand that.
And this newspaper issue is my lane, and I'm staying in it. And that was just an outright lie. I don't even understand how she could say that.
Well, let me just say, if I may, reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman, that they were under oath when I asked the question. I tried to probe it in the length of time that we had, and I think that we were misled. So, Mr. Chairman, I will consult with you, but I think I'm on the verge of asking for an investigation. First of all, it's discriminatory.
Absolutely.
And it appears that the African American newspapers are being told that they must give free space and editorials, or they will not get money. It's a
Now, they have
stipulation.
retracted that, in all fairness. After my letter and after my confrontation with Ms. Ennis, Mr. Coleman, who I never heard from, and Mr. What's his name? Jarvis? Jose. He did. They rescinded that because we were about to hire a lawyer to sue them.
That's right.
On the basis of freedom, our freedom of the right. Freedom of information,
That's right.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
Well,
You know,
you're
our
absolutely
freedom-
correct, and
First Amendment rights,
if
that's
it
what I was.
has, if it has been rescinded and it's not been requested now, that will certainly cause me not to pursue an investigation in this matter. If there's one thing I can't stand, it is gross unfairness. I just will not tolerate
Well, the
that.
fact that they did it, though, the fact that they did it, they don't do it. They didn't do that with the. You asked the question, how was that in relationship to the white press? They probably asked for added value for all of the media. That's sort of common in the industry. But to mandate and to say that you are going to be penalized punitively and we're going to take your advertising, that is reflective of the attitude and the mentality that they have when it comes to dealing with the black press and the black media.
And thank you for that. And Representative Waters, we will review the testimony, and if we see discrepancy, we will turn it over to the
Mr. Chairman,
investigative
just,
arm of this committee.
Thank you so much. And in wrapping up, I just want to make sure that if you decide to move forward to ask for supplemental appropriation or more money, whether or not these people who are here testifying tonight will be supportive of that. Would you support
Absolutely.
increased amount of money to go to?
I would,
Yes.
I would say something further about the black press.
Yes.
Every city that we have gone to, and I'll give you an example of Houston and New Orleans, where we have built ethnic media networks, it has been the black media that have opened the door. They've been the gate openers. It isn't a question of black media being told to run this material. The whole mindset is screwed up. It's a top-down mindset shaped by mainstream media advertising ideas. Mainstream media is melted down. It barely exists anymore. And now you've got ethnic media that's growing because people can't do it without it. They have the audience, and they are totally dedicated to this, but they're being ignored. They're not being asked what they would do to effectively message out. IW Group is probably doing the best job of trying to get input from local Asian media about what would work in their communities. But they've been largely restricted, as Karen said, to national advertising. What we've got to do, given the very limited time we've got left, is bring our media and trust them to be the messengers and help shape the messages, and not just leave it to a top-down construct that has shown itself they're not even here. Why didn't they stay?
Right.
If I was getting $300 million, I'd damn well stay for this hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you very much.
point
Thank
well
you
made.
very
I know the hour is late, but it really is important to ask the question, why won't they follow our recommendations? Black newspapers, as an example, as well as black radio, we couldn't exist in communities where we don't have the pulse, the heart, and souls of the community supporting us. I mean, the fact that we would have tried and trusted organs in the community, and we recommend to them that they buy. I've had this conversation with Congresswoman Jackson Lee. We recommended Doris's paper, and they didn't take it. Eventually, after we badgered and we went back and had her call, and I had a conversation. Same is true with Congressman Clay. Why would that happen? How can you be committed to counting 40 million African Americans and come out with a program in 16 markets in America? It absolutely, I mean, befuddles the imagination.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate
you.
the time.
Thank you so much, Representative Representative Jackson Lee.
I can't thank the chairman enough for his leadership and vision on this issue. And, Mr. Chairman, I would like to have the members who are here, I don't want to speak for them, but I know that if they're not on the committee, if we could have our staffs added to your email list so that we can be aware at your courtesy and invitation to come to these upcoming hearings that I know that you're going to have.
You certainly will be notified, invited, and most welcome to attend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I am going to ask for an investigation, and since we are in this committee, I am going to make it official, and that will be up to you and your staff to assess. Because I made the point on the record that the census contracts were rendered in the previous administration in 2007, there's an instructive point that I would like to make. I know timing is everything, but I would prefer contracts not being made by lame duck administrations, number one, but number two, because these contracts then disperse the $300 million, so in essence I cannot go to Director Gross and ask for an accounting, then I would like to have an investigation as to the utilization of the $300 million. And I think Congressman Waters asked it, but I would like it to be in the form of an investigation. How were those dollars used? And the previous panel, a witness said he believes that the cow is out of the barn. I don't know that. I'm confused. Do I have $300 million left or a portion thereof? Do I have to have a supplemental, or can I go back in and reconfigure the buys? I don't know that. I'm not a media buy person. I happen to think that you do have the opportunity to reconfigure some of the buys or some of the prioritizations. For example, I believe that the genius of the people sitting before us is stellar. I believe that Vince Young in Houston, Texas, that won the Rose Bowl, could be on an advertisement in the local papers and got more young people running to be in the census than I can have any national star, no disrespect to them, or actor, or whoever it is, that's going to charge me $1,000 an hour. I think the local restaurant person that the black newspaper, or the Latino newspaper, or the Asian newspaper, or the Native American newspaper could put in, or the chief in the tribe.
And Representative Jackson Lee, not to cut you off, but we will give you a full accounting of those $300 million. And Representative Cuellar has brought up some very valid issue about the expenditures being made, and so have you. So
and I did not let you answer, so let me just say that I'm asking for an investigation, and the chairman has said that you will do so. I'm so sorry. So I do believe, and the reason why I'm going on that point is because if we look at whether there's production costs, and the production cost is 90%, then I would say to Mr. Winston, I know you could get people interviewed on your stations that would have people running to be registered, to be part of the census, as opposed to some production media that comes and you have to play. So let me ask this question, Mr. Bakewell. You're saying you have how many, 200?
Yeah, 200 black publishers, right.
All right. Let me do this before I do it. Mr. Chairman, can I put Mr. Bakewell's January 13, 2010, it may be already in it, ask unanimous consent to put in the record.
Without objection.
To Mr. Coleman, and then his January 15th, 2010 letter to Ms. Ennis, I believe.
Without objection, so on.
Thank you. I have a document here that indicates a list of local black newspapers, and they go up to 152, and you said there were 200. Now, is this something that you say have been fixed, or what is this I'm looking at?
Well, I don't know what you're looking at. As far as we know, that all of our newspapers, in spite of the fact that we recommended all of them, they are not all on the buy. We had some that were just put on the buy today. And one of the things that you have to be mindful of is that when you get put on the buy, what does that mean? What they have done is that instead of all of the newspapers running advertising consistently, like we recommended that you start in January, you take a full-page ad out, and you run that every week, consistently, messaging, making sure you have the right, kind of layout. They ran, first of all, it didn't start in January. It didn't start until February. And it started for, they gave some newspapers a 6-week run or a 4-week run, one full-page ad, one half-page ad, 2 quarter-page ads, then you stop, and then another, yes?
Ms. Bakewell, I want to get on the record now. How many do you think, to your knowledge, is getting ads of your membership of 200?
Of our membership of 200, I don't think we're past 125.
Okay. I don't know where this came from, but that's why this is part of the investigation. They list 152. So you're saying that that's inaccurate to your knowledge.
To my knowledge, we have not been confirmed that those are all our newspapers. There may be some papers that they're selecting who are not members of
Will the
NNPA.
gentleman yield for a moment with the lady? Congresswoman, I don't know what this represents, but there's one named newspaper that's listed 18 times in 18 different cities.
Yes, that's rollout.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
I
You
want
asked
to
a
tell
good
you
question.
something is wrong here.
I've asked for an investigation.
And so this really does have to be looked at because, you know, it's just so unusual. It is not something that most of us are aware of, and most of us are aware of the African-American newspaper population all over the country. So when she says that's 152 and 18 of them are some newspaper that's supposed to be in 18 cities, that really does have to be critiqued and looked at. I don't know if
We will ask, the committee will ask for a full accounting of the buy for 18 for the rolling out publication.
If there were any way to also include the Afro-Caribbean media, like the Ethiopian. One of the draft FCB person mentioned Somali, but to our knowledge, the Somali media of Minneapolis and the Ethiopian media, but even more worrisome, why would San Bernardino, Riverside, one of the poorest and fastest growing region in our state, left out both Spanish language radio and the San Bernardino Sun? That's one of the oldest black newspapers in the state.
Yeah, I know this is not my area, and it's Winston's area, but I would tell you one of the things that I went over today, just in terms of talking about how, because we're all focusing on how do we get this done. We're really not trying to find reasons not to do this. We're trying to consolidate to say, how do we make this a success? In terms of black radio, they have told them to go into the markets and go into the top 20 markets and take the top 2 rated stations for those markets. Those are probably black programmed, but not black owned stations. That does not mean that the black owned stations are not reaching, both with depth and reach, the community. But they're just not focused on us in a way that is representative and realistic.
Representative Jackson Lee, would you conclude your
If I might, my staff has
questioning?
informed me that this list that I'm holding in my hand, 152, came from the Census, U.S. Census, and maybe we can explore this. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask unanimous consent to add this to the record. It is not labeled. It says list of local black newspapers receiving 2010 census advertisement. So maybe we can have a review of what this is, because it is in conflict with Mr. Bakewell. I want to move very quickly to Mr. Winston, just to
Without objection.
follow up, and thank you, to follow up on this question or this point that Mr. Bakewell's made, and I was going to that very point. It would be helpful if you could submit from your perspective or your list to this committee what stations you know to be getting out of your organization to be getting advertisement. You say you have how many stations, Mr.
There are
Winston?
245.
I'm sorry.
245 radio stations.
Do you have knowledge?
13 television stations.
Do you have knowledge that the 245 and the 13 are getting advertisement?
I know that many of them are not. I do not have an exact count.
Okay.
But I have had a number of stations contact me saying that they either have not heard from the Census Bureau at all, or they've been promised advertising that has never arrived. And I've seen in my testimony, I mentioned exactly what Mr. Bakewell was talking about a minute ago, about their targeting stations based upon Arbitron ratings. So they're taking the black targeted stations, which may have nothing to do with black ownership and have no connection to the black community.
Then I would ask you if you would do your own research. Maybe you all have the resources, but you got 245 and 13 television.
Right.
I'd appreciate it if you could give us that report. Secondarily, I would ask, for example, to note whether or not, and I use these only as examples, so I don't want the other universities to raise up their voices, but I use them as examples. WHUR, I'm wondering whether they considered university-based stations. KTSU, Texas Southern University. I say that to say that's an odd component of our communities. Do they know that that is, however, a very important part of our communities? And they're PBS, some of them, of course, but the point is they reach a population that we want to be counted. Would you check that for me, please?
Sure. And WHUR is actually a commercial station. It is one of the NABOB member stations. So I'll be happy to look into that for you as well. And I hope that you will also ask the Census Bureau for their record on what they say is the black target stations and the black-owned stations that they claim to have reached.
And that's a very good point. I will just close, Mr. Chairman, by saying, Ms. Close, you've been very articulate. I just want this question to ask. Do you believe that it would be more effective to utilize local personalities and local focus and local content that would actually pierce and penetrate the neighborhoods throughout America that listen to localized programming and media? Mr. Bakewell?
Absolutely.
Mr. Winston?
Absolutely.
And Ms. Close?
Absolutely.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jackson Lee, and thank you for your participation in the hearing. Let me close out by asking one question each of you, and I'll start with Ms. Close. Discuss for us, after seeing the initial photos and the ads, discuss for us the importance of specialized ethnic media outlets in motivating the hard-to-count population, and speak to the necessity of recognizing cultural sensitivities in crafting a message. And you can bet that they are monitoring these hearings. So I want to hear it from you, someone that's in the field.
When I was in Hoopa, which is 7.5 hours drive from San Francisco, very isolated part of the state, the bumper stickers on the cars said, "Think you can trust government? Ask an Indian." The people who run the Two Rivers Tribune, and I mention the Indian only now because we haven't really heard from the American Indian. The Two Rivers Tribune publisher said that most of the advertising to reach American Indians was going into billboards, and that most people in their community don't really go on the freeways, and in any case, the Redwood Highway doesn't have billboards. And then they showed me those ads, the teepee ads, and they said they were too offended to run them. And so we said, well, if we give you $2,000, will you come up with your own? I mean, this is what is so ridiculous, to imply that black media need to be told what to run and what to editorialize. These media are chomping at the bit to develop their own messaging. And then they came up with that wonderful, if you want to save your water rights, be counted. Yes.
And let me also ask Mr. Winston, how do past census buys compare with the current effort in terms of your membership participating in media buys? Is it the same experience or different? Or?
I was told that in actual dollars, the numbers that have come down so far this year are lower than the 2000 census.
That's right.
And obviously you've got 10 years of inflation to add into those lower dollars. So it's significantly less in terms of what's happened. I don't know if that's, in part, as I said, there are people who've been promised dollars that they haven't even seen yet. So I think part of it is failure of execution and also a question of the limited budget.
Mr. Bakewell, same question. How does that compare with 2000?
I don't know specifically because I was not in this position as chair of the NNPA, but I can tell you many of the members have said to me that last time they got more money and the buys were more consistent. And that's what we have been fighting for, as you well know.
Let me did you have something to add?
the contract was purchased under another, not purchased, but structured under another administration, that we had a lot of input at that time. I remember, I don't know if Congresswoman, if you may yield, Mr. Chairman, I don't remember Congresswoman Maxine Waters, but I think we had come together and really had an impact before they went out with the structure that they used. Even though we had undercounts, I remember specifically having outreach through congressional offices that made much more, that made a difference.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Bakewell?
could,
I thank you for yielding.
Thank you.
Congressman Waters, you asked a question, and I'm not sure this is the specific answer, but I think it is. You asked the guy who was heading up, who was the head of the agency who got all the money, the $300-some million, about RFPs. I think what he was sort of being very delicate about is that they put together a team, and the RFP that they're talking about was that he submitted, the master agency, an RFP for that one contract. All of those individual 12 agencies that he had did not submit an RFP to him. He selected them, and the RFP which he was telling you about was the one RFP that they submitted to the census. So you were right on point and on track in terms of there was a pre-selection of the people that he decided he wanted to have on his team.
Let me close out this hearing and first thank all of the participants in this hearing. I believe it was exhaustive. I believe it was eye-opening, and I thank you for understanding the time frame that we conducted this hearing in. Ms. Close, I'm sorry about you missing your plane, and sorry about you all being inconvenienced in this way. It was really unavoidable. Interesting issues have been raised this evening. This subcommittee will follow up and share what we find with the participants of this committee, of this hearing, the whole issue of ethnic media, the entire issue of media bias, and we will move forward accordingly. And so let me thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, before you end, I really have to thank you. We really want to go on record as thanking you for the leadership. This is a most vital and important hearing. And again, your leadership and your vision for knowing and making this an imperative hearing has been extraordinary to, I believe, ultimately trying to get to the bottom and getting a successful 2010 census.
Thank you, Mr.
And I
Bakewell.
join in
We
Mr.
will
Bakewell's comments.
thank you, Mr. Wilson, and we will stay on this subject. And I thank all of you. Hearing adjourned.